So, Father, Mother God, we just now ask for the presence of the Christ and through the guidance of the Holy Spirit. We ask for only that which is to the highest good. And through the permission of the Christ and the Holy Spirit, we ask any guides, teachers, angels, or beings of light that wish to be here and be of assistance. And we ask for this in perfect love, perfect understanding, keeping in mind the destinies on the planet. So I want to start out in this, it's sure a big change since, lots changed since last week. Things are moving along. We'll probably take a perspective on that before we're through tonight. But in the beginning of this tonight, there's this, just starting with this huge invitation into the silence. We moved into that last week as a place of transition, a place of transfer between our sensory awareness going out into the world and acting out of what's reflected back to a sensory awareness that goes into the vastness of the depth of God, for lack of a better term. And the nectar of nothing. That may be an interesting way to look at it. Some of the sound current teachers look at light, sound, and nectar, and there's this kind of sweetness to the silence, and it's in that place that we begin to recognize this deeper intention of our being. It's like we exist because there was some kind of movement into form, some kind of impulse. And last week we talked about Quimby's perspective that consciousness was science, and so we're created to explore, to be curious, and to take situations and circumstances that we run into or find ourselves in, and respond in a way that applies a remedy or a change of course. It's like this natural place inside that when we meet a challenge or a calamity, either a comet hitting the planet or a pandemic, earthquake, um, we start to generate courses of action. It's a stochastic response. In other words, we run out scenarios about different options, and that may seem like, well, we're just thinking up different ways we could do it, but as in the nature of the soul is science, there's an actual energy that goes out and explores a reality. So it's like all these scenarios are alternate realities. And so we go out and investigate that, and that's a scientific action. We explore that, and then we pick the one that best suits us, best resonates. And they found that there's genetic changes as as our organism, as plants, as animals, as they evolve and seek more complexity, the genetics change, and some of the genetics change is due to physical science looks at that and says, oh, it's because of this thing that happened in the physical world. Soul science looks at it like, oh, we chose a reality. We investigated and chose a reality. And that consciousness then started to mutate us to live in that environment, to live in that reality, in that place we would find ourselves in. So we begin to settle in this place of silence, and we become aware of that process. Because we have to get beyond the mind, beyond the ego, to be impressed by the movement of soul, by the movement of life. So, beginning with a reminder of that, a reminder to seek that acquaintanceship inside. When we lose that awareness, it has a fundamental effect on us. In that ability to move into the silence, we can begin to embody love, and that's a beyond the mind sense of love. We start to understand that this love and intelligence is it's almost like one intelligence. And so when we're embodying that, we become like the hand of that, the reaching out of that. So we're when we embody that, we become the science of that consciousness, because we individualize. We bring into an individual consciousness in a body that can respond to the elements, that has to be maintained in a healthy way, is concerned about survival and living. So that we have to confront life in a existential way, and so that provides a certain kind of opportunity. So part of that, though, is that we get in this physical body, we get very pulled out into the elements and into other people's situations that have all be doing the same thing, and so this evolution of our ego begins, and it creates a individual sense of ourselves, and this is appropriate. And then the risk in that is it's not a negative risk, but we start to gain the experience of being sentient, being alive, being feeling, being conditional love, and having the experience of being cut off from our own source. So this is pretty amazing to get your awareness around that. Oh, I feel cut off, abandoned, alone, and we feel isolated. So the illusion is that you're actually cut off. But the truth of it is, it's the experience of being cut off. And just that's pretty amazing that a consciousness is born out of the wholeness for the purpose of discovering, exploring, and creating, can have an individual experience of aloneness, isolation, and fear, which is the opposite of its nature. Well, so then this changes the science, because our ingenuity goes into how to preserve, well, if we're afraid, we have to feel safe. If we're hungry, we have to find food. If we need shelter, if we're in our elements, we have to find shelter. So we begin to organize our identity around that. So the science goes into solving that situation. And inadvertently starts to be narrowed, so that it, in our science, in our exploration, in our discovery, in what we invent, we reinforce the isolation. So within that, there's this connection that still affects our sense of things. So our becoming powerful, or becoming important, or becoming important through being a victim, or sense of fame, they never satisfy. It's like we've heard stories of people focus their life and make all this money and get all this thing. It doesn't satisfy. So then they go into philanthropy, because they're looking for some kind of reconnection with their soul, with the real science. So there's this kind of expression where all of our activity and all of our discovery is based on maintaining an identity of our ego, of our smallness, which is a kind of reversal on what we really are. Well, so that has consequences, because it interrupts the supply chain from the spirit. So a body, a creation that comes out of the wholeness, has been cut off from the supply of that wholeness. So from Quimby's perspective, this creates disease in the organism. In other words, it reflects in the organism. We also see that it creates disease in the society. It creates dysfunction, it creates poverty, it creates lack. So the when we begin to realize what happened, our challenge becomes how to reconnect and how to reorganize and re-identify ourselves so that the science can express through us, or soul express through us, in terms of how we were looking at it with Quimby last time. So we don't realize it at first, but we have a lot of help. So most things that go wrong are trying to help us. The whole thing with the coronavirus is it's kind of beautiful in a way, because it can't be controlled. We can just control our relationship to it. And so we have choices of how to control our relationship to it, which has different consequences on how we participate in the virus. And there's it's not just something that happened now. Each one of us has been through a process of evolution where we made these kind of choices before, and so our constitution is different. So some of us have a constitution that's really vulnerable to it, and some of us aren't. They say, older people are more vulnerable to it because they're older. Well, when we get older, we start coming into that harvest time where we're reflecting on our lifetime and picking the pieces we want to keep and resolving the ones we regret. So it's a challenge. It contributes to that process. In this case, there's a call to everybody. Well, everybody can carry this, so it's about you staying well, but it's also about you might make somebody else sick because your system doesn't get sick from this thing. So when these things come up, like a pandemic, we look at them in terms of what's happening to the individual as they deal with this issue? How does it change them? And the ones that do change, we begin to realize that it builds character. It calls forward the reconciliation with our higher virtues. One of the reasons some of the Asian countries are responding very effectively to this is because some of the other things like SARS and so forth hit them harder. And so they learned their lesson. And so they're Like Korea is like really on it, or Hong Kong's really on it in a much more conscious way. And we're, the rest of the world's joining them because there's certain things that work. So there's this wonderful it's you probably heard of the term nemesis. So it's usually thought of in a negative way. What's the thing that is my arch enemy that's going to defeat me, my nemesis? We think of that as a negative thing. But in the origins of it, the nemesis, it was a god, a Greek god, a female Greek god. And her job was to bring consequence to people's arrogance or their false gains, their undeserving gains, their arrogance. So her job was to bring. So she's like a karmic agent. Was to bring to reconcile that, to challenge, to combat that. It's a little bit like Shiva, I guess. It's the angel of death, but it's really the angel of every way you've taken to yourself a worry or concern or identity that's not resonant, that's dissonant to your soul. It will challenge. It will shake it. It will rip it away. So actually, nemesis is born out of the denial of our own spirit. It's the anti-science, in a sense, that nemesis comes as an intelligence that assists you to be challenged. So it comes in on your areas of where you're blind or unconscious or misidentified yourself with for some reason. So the arrogance and hubris comes out of an unconscious lack, some place where you feel at the core of yourself you're insufficient. So you reach out here to build something in the world, either by dominating others or being subservient to someone who can dominate you, and you can borrow power from them. So things like the coronavirus comes as a nemesis. So it's serving us in that way. Viruses operate in a very interesting way. They come into your system and they plug into your cell and start converting the protein in the cells for its use. In other words, they lack something, so they have to take it. And then once they have acquired it, they can build more virus. They can build more of them. So they have a lack. They're seeking to live off of something else. When we spent a little time with a workshop with Viana Steibel that developed the theta healing, she could see, like she looks at something when she's going to heal it. And so she looks at the virus, and so her take on the virus was the best antidote for the virus is love. When you put love into the virus, it becomes something else. In other words, it no longer has to be marauding. It no longer has to be a marauder that comes in and takes in order to survive and multiply. So our vulnerability is any place that's not loved inside of us. Which is essentially what Quimby was talking about, the inherent nature of our expression. When interrupted by distorted beliefs or identity, creates a situation where we rob from ourselves, in a sense. So you clear up those beliefs, and then the conversion can occur, the reconciliation can occur with oneself. So the virus is born out of perpetuated lack within inside of humanity as a corrective measure. It's a little bit like, Jung's shadow, where any denial of yourself comes around as the opposite, to challenge it. So how we line up with this, we can line up with the fear, and then everything we do to deal with the pandemic is an existential issue. Our survival is on the line, and when we live in that, it goes deep. Like, we'll be annihilated. Annihilated means to that belief structure the annihilation of your soul. You'll cease to be. So in a sense, you're being a virus infecting the pandemic. So it's harder for it to do its job. Interesting thought. Well, we find our way into the silence and reconcile with the loving. We know that we're eternal, and we're part of the workings of the whole. We're just an individual awareness of that. Well, what does that change? Well, it doesn't change that there's an issue in the world to deal with, because we're embodied in this existence that is subject to this. But what it does is it changes, it makes everything a practical issue. Like keeping 6 feet apart, or not touching your face, or washing your hands, helping out, buying groceries for the elderly that have to be in the house. All this becomes a practical issue and not an existential one. So it's a wholly different expression. There's a consistency between the movement of love from your spirit, or the love that is science. There's a clean movement through you to the action of the practical action, some of which is to survive, preserve the organism, be healthy. See, so there's a great deal of power in that. So then you become a remedy to the virus, like Vienna discovered. You give loving to the virus, it changes its nature. See, it's just trying to come home. Because it feels a vacancy. So you provide the loving, it changes. So when we can center that way, it moves the fear out to the periphery, so it can just tell you what to deal with. In other words, the fear is out here triaging the environment, rather than you believing, you going with the fear and being another infection. So from that difference in perspective inside, you move out of your loving. You probably do the same practical things, but then the purpose of the nemesis then, you're assisting that, because you're creating climates and actions and interactions that bring unity, that bring people together. So in our need to isolate as a practical issue with the virus, we're actually creating a situation in which we bring people closer together, because the intimacy comes from an inside-out situation. So if we're in the paranoia and fear, there's some groups of people, the other kind of purchasing people were doing in some areas was to go buy guns. So you know that some people are taking this in a very affected way. Oh, we're going to be in danger, we have to protect ourselves. We have to kill to stay alive. Well, they don't realize the unity. Well, other people are doing things like making food available, helping people out, just cloistering themselves, like, well, okay, folks, we're going to take a month off and all go to the monastery and have some quiet time with God. See, so well, I have to go out and do I have to take care of things. But you come out of that monastery ethic, see, and that's not a fearful one. So that brings the energy that starts to reconcile the needs of the virus. So from that perspective, I'm not sure, maybe all these practical things we do stop the virus, but maybe just because people start shifting to altruistic actions in order to deal with the pandemic, that unleashes a wave of love that balances the virus. See? Well, I suspect that the case is it takes both. Well, this was Quimby's whole point. How do you change your beliefs? Well, you can have them ripped off by by nemesis, or you can just do a little self-forgiveness with your priest. See, those are similar. So you might as well put your most precious things on the altar that you believe, your most precious beliefs about yourself, and be grateful for their service and grateful for your recognizing who you are. I always like to have I guess it's a light figure. Last week I really enjoyed talking about Quimby and some of the things that, because he became an example of, see, if we have an example with Jesus and Buddha or all like that, you study their lives and see, well, how'd they do this? What were their qualities? And I'm the same research project, so how can I do that? So the one I wanted to talk about tonight is George Washington Carver. How many people have heard of George Washington Carver? Well, most of you. And so he's a person worth studying. He was a black man in the South. When he was born, slavery was still going on. He lost his parents, was taken in by other people. And, I had I'd heard about him, but I had a very intimate exposure to him when I was at Quimby Center. There was a woman named Louise Eggleston, and she was, even at that time, was, you know, Dr. Hunter was old, but she was even older. She was like 80s or not, maybe in her 90s. And she'd met George Washington Carver. There was a church movement back in the early days, the early 1900s, and so called Camps Furthest Out, and Carver would be a part of this interracial movement. So anyway, she met him and went to him, and he talked to her a while, and this is something I haven't found anyplace else besides her personal testimony. It would have been nice to get that on a recording, but we weren't smart enough at the time. But he explained to her that he was conscious of this. I came from such and such spiritual level into this incarnation to transform the consciousness of the South. And then he did a healing treatment on her, and it was very powerful because the presence of spirit was just there. She felt like she was even levitated a bit. So in the history, it's mostly about his people who encountered him in an external way, but she had this intimate conversation with him. Well, anyway, as the story went on, he was incessantly pursued education, where he would, you know, do laundry, clean, and go anywhere he could get some education, which finally resulted in him ending up with a graduate degree in chemistry. There were two areas of his life. He was a gifted scientist, but he was also an artist. So he got that kind of credentialing, and then went to the Tuskegee Institute and was charged with building up their agriculture department. Well, so the other thing that happened along his path there is, as a young person, he was, this is the story goes, he was sitting in the hayloft of a barn in contemplation, and this energy came over him, just palpable divine love and presence. So he went into the silence, met the Creator, and that energy became embodied in him. So he had that divine consciousness, but also this temperament that was very practical. So, to make a long story short, he became very well known in his lifetime, and developed many innovations in agriculture that really transformed the economy of the South. And the way he did this, well, there was a need. Like he would teach advanced farming techniques, and the farmers would have too many peanuts and they couldn't sell them, and so then he had a problem. So then he had this talent that was developed with him all his life, where he would go out into nature and talk to the plant, and in this conversation, it would be revealed to him what the purpose, and the way he looked at it, why the purpose for which God created that plant. And so this science of Quimby is even working through the plant. So he would, Quimby found his way to talk to spirit. This was Carver's way. So he would get the information, that this plant was created to do such and such, this was its purpose. And then he would take that and he would go back into this chemistry lab and synthesize that purpose. You know, which ended up finding all kinds of uses and applications for the peanut. He did that with several other crops. And one of the main qualities of him was humility. It seems like, so with humility, you don't create a nemesis. And he discovered with the loving that love would unlock anything. He would even talk to a person and find that if you love them enough, they would open up to their darkest secrets and their pain and their imbalances, much like Quimby did. You talk to the plant and it will reveal to you what its purposes are. He had that kind of a depth of loving. Through his career, he mostly lived off his fee, that his salary from the working at Tuskegee Institute, and not off of any royalties from this wide range of developed things he discovered in his scientific process. So the cornerstones of his approach was love, where he was present in every way, all the time, in loving, in the love. That was the key. That was the pass key into everything. The other cornerstone was what he called expectancy. There was just like an anticipation. It's that, you know, when we talk about being present with what is, and what do you notice, that's an expectancy. It's you're in awe of creation. You're in awe of like a human being and their peculiarities. It's like and there's an anticipation that God will present itself through whatever is present before him. So that's the scientific impulse. You're following this innate impulse to discover, to explore, to have revealed to you the mysteries of life, to elaborate, to see what you can synthesize and make out of it. So he was always looking at it with that kind of innocence. And the other leg of the stool was humility. And that's that ability to move into the silence and be nothing enough to be everything. That cuts through all your stuff we do to be safe, to be important, to be noticed, to be this, to be that. To be just be. And what that does is made him equal to everything. Everything, everyone he'd meet, every high person, every low person, he was equal to that. Every challenge, he was equal to that. It was just never higher or lower. So that's, you know, part of the power of humility. And in his humility, he could move into that still place. Okay, your turn. So if I didn't put you into trance or put you to sleep, it's, you know. Yeah, Jessica.
Thank you for saying that. I got a lot out of how you were describing it, especially the part about this reinforcing of the isolation, that we're going through this experience of that when we start reinforcing our own isolation, then that sort of interrupts the supply chain. That piece is where this idea of disease of some sort can come in, and that we're in the process of sort of reconnecting, and the nemesis helping us to understand where we're reinforcing our own isolation.
In a sense, it's like fasting. You know, we're fasting on our error. Mm-hmm. Because isolation brings us into a greater intimacy with the wholeness. If you isolate enough.
But that there's also a nuance between isolation and the stillness too. Yeah. It's like stillness.
Yeah, that's the shift.
Right.
And so we're being forced to that. I know when I was in that sensory deprivation experiment, that's where I went. Well, that was my evolution. Other people in the same experiment went to the isolation and had to get out of that chamber. They couldn't take their own. Maybe that's what it means by you can't. If you look on the face of God, you'll die. You know, they couldn't take that confrontation of their connection to things, their need. So say more about that. Where does that take you inside?
Well, it's almost like we're getting a deeper opportunity to notice where our misunderstandings lie between our own stillness and that isolation.
Yeah.
But that it's also really beautiful how we're getting, it's a little bit of an abrupt thing that's happening because we're all having to move a little bit differently inside of our worlds. Mm-hmm. I mean, last week I was like, I'm choosing this reality again. Like when Trump got elected, I was like, oh God. And then I kind of did that with, when I first started to catch on to what was going on, and I started going through my own mental checklist about the practical things. But then, I started to reassure myself of like, you know how to be in the stillness, and so that's where we're going to go. And but what I'm excited to do is to start looking a little bit more deeply about where I've reinforced my own isolation.
Yeah. And some of that isolation is just protecting some place in the past where we were injured and we had to protect by isolating or by putting distance. See, that's part of the cure of the disease. Put distance. It's like so some place in there you had to protect. So once we find those places, we can reconcile them.
And nemesis is one of the ways that we do it.
Well, yeah, because anything less than the presence of the love and the movement of that consciousness through us to discover and create complexity and see how far we can go. See, is a betrayal of ourselves. It's an arrogance. So there's many metaphors like this in different teachings. Like, when in the whole story of Paradise Lost, Lucifer comes to earth. I'd rather rule in hell than serve in heaven. So that's just a statement of the ego. I'd rather be important well, that's an evolutionary process. I want to gain my identity, but the primitive state of that is that of the arrogance of this is I am God. I'm instead of being part of God. He cut off a piece of it and said, "No, this is mine." And so it isolates from the wholeness. And so that becomes our character.
I can see where it gets nuanced too, because when you're saying about putting it on the altar, putting the misunderstandings or who you thought you were, put that on the altar. And the part that shakes to me when I think about that is that you do have to work out where the places that I have felt isolation, because it can feel like the things you're putting on the altar are the way to stay safe or be alive.
Yeah. So the pain, the fear, the emotion, the consternation, all that those aren't negative emotions. Those are just symptoms of the deconstruction of your arrogance. So once we get that, we may be miserable and crying and sobbing, but we trust that, I'm being taken apart here, and what's going to be left besides a puddle on the floor is going to be good stuff. Yeah. See, this is distillation process. I'm going to come out of this with something I'm going to come out of this with a reconciliation, with something deep and beyond my imagination about who I really am. So, shake away. So, we see some people just start making excuses and trying to blame it on this and blame it on that. That's just sad, because they're missing an opportunity. Well, thanks.
Thank you
for opening that up with us. Oh, you got two people here. Yeah, go ahead, Denise. Did you have your hand up, Denise?
Yes, I did.
I thought you were swatting bugs or something.
Yeah, it's dark in here. It's the window's open and now the lights are going down. I haven't turned on the light, but I've had a little bit of a different experience. It relates completely to what you said, but I want to talk about it a little. I feel in a way less isolated, or I feel less pressure to go out and be with people. And so there's almost like a peace coming in for just like, there's nothing I have to do and there's no pressure that people are on in the world to go, except to hoard things. They're not going to work. They're not pressuring to be something. There's like a softer energy. It's like, I don't know how to explain it. It's like a simplification. And then I'm going, oh, good. What can I do? I can head into creativity. I can still see people on the beach. And if I want to walk with someone on an empty beach or go in nature. So I started creating the things that I can do that will be real, that I want to do and that I love to do. But I still get into waking up sometimes and getting into the energy of fear. So I'm trying to, I don't know where that's coming from in me, but maybe survival level. And
well, see, when you wake up in the morning, I find this anyway, anything I didn't resolve by the end of the day before, will settle on me. And so some of that is things in the community or people I'm working with, that'll settle on me. Or anything I haven't, I've just been kind of unconscious with, will settle on me. So I have all that kind of crap on me when I first wake up. Well, if I were to take that personally, I would think I was sick. But what I take it is, well, what's this information here? So what I find works very nicely is if I just kind of cool it with the expectancy as Carver would do, of it sorting itself out if I let it. So I let it sort itself out. And so in that protocol, the fear that's laying on me likely would just lift off. Whether it's from outside of you or you made it, it's just going to lift off because you're choosing to just, bask in the presence and let it sort itself out. And so sometimes people have rituals in the morning and they're sorting this out and don't realize it. Like they'll get up and they'll have a cup of coffee or tea. All of us have some kind of ritual like that. And what's going on is we're letting that sort itself out. In other words, we're cooperating with ourselves.
Yeah. Well, there's really is an opportunity to be more present because it's like, I don't know, I feel a lot more presence right now.
Yeah, and then so we can play with that. Does it, and you said, I think you got this. I think you said you got this. You also feel less isolated even though in your isolation. So that what that is a symptom of going into that place where of intimacy with everybody.
Mm-hmm.
So you're actually closer to them than when you're doing the social game.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And no pressure to have to do something or see people. Like just because I haven't seen anybody, so I'm alone.
Yeah, so, but all that have to comes out of lack, trying to fix the lack. So you're reconciling the lack inside of you, that's probably the remedy for most things we get into mischief with. Anyway, thanks. Luann?
Thank you, honey.
Yeah. Oh, you moved over there together. Sometimes something shifts people around and I lose track of where they are. Yeah.
Hi. What I'm most aware of is what I'm being hit with a little bit is what feels like kind of an inner conflict of, well, I am important on some level, based on who I am, and then like a confusion about my authentic importance. And I figure this important came in because of the humility. For some reason, I'm kind of linking those two together, that not really as opposites, but sort of as opposites, but I feel kind of a certain conviction about a belief that I am important, and that how I choose to address this, as I continue to just forgive all day long about, mostly because not mostly, but in part I'm in an environment where I'm hearing a lot of the news.
Yeah.
And so I'm doing a lot of forgiving, and I think for the first time, or one of the first times, I've noticed I felt a weird feeling about wanting to love the virus.
Yeah.
Like when it came to loving another trait in me, or a trait in somebody else that's shitty, or a shitty trait I have, or something I'm working out. Somehow this one, I get a little spooked by loving it.
Yeah, that's okay. But it doesn't mean you don't have boundaries.
Okay.
Just like any other kind of nemesis. You love them, but maybe you don't, you have boundaries. Like, and so part of the boundaries with this one is 6 feet. I love you from 6 feet away. See? So in other words, there's boundaries. So one thing we get in this is, we maybe do the forgiveness or do the loving, and we end the humility. Humility is an equal to everything. It's not a hierarchical thing. So you don't give over to things you have to confront. You may still tell truth to power. See,
yeah, that was what I kept wanting to do. And then I thought, well, when you brought in that self-importance thing, I got a little...
No, well, you tell truth to power because that's what truth does.
Okay.
Not because you want to be important or make up for a lack.
That's why. Okay.
Like, I'm going to go out and be a hero. It takes care of my lack. I want to be, celebrated. Why? Well, is it a consequence of your using fame to do good? Or is it a consequence of you making up for how shitty you feel about yourself or how much shame you have by being famous?
Mm-hmm.
So that's the shift. So we focused on precision last time. So we have to be very, so if you're conflicted, you're probably not being precise.
Okay.
Because you're conflating things. See, so you start just sorting them out, like parsing them out till you get the distinction. And that takes precision. Well, if you're doubting yourself, you can't move into precision.
Well, I keep thinking, take care of yourself first. Take care of yourself first. And help take care of others and use it all, the basics. And I've been a little more stressed because I live with my mother who's 86 right now. And so I've been feeling this sense of over responsibility for walking in that door every day or out of it. And
why do you call it over responsibility?
I don't know. I just feel this, I move through moments of feeling really precise, like in the precision, and then feeling very overwhelmed with feeling like if I walk in with it and give it to her that I'm scared.
Why isn't that giving her what she needs?
The virus?
Yeah. She said, I've been trying to get out here for the past 10 years. Give me the virus.
Oh, God. Yeah. All right.
So the overwhelming is you getting outside of yourself. See, our responsibility is to be ourselves in such a deep, intimate way that we're compatible with everything. So we're moving with everything. So the harmonic relationship with the highest good. And you can't think about that. You have to, be present in the loving. If you walk in the house and you're feeling, quote, over responsible, overwhelmed, wait. Get what's taking care of yourself mean. Get back into the silence. Realign with your intimacy. Let that, and that'll move all those vibrations out to where you can see them. And make you aware of what you need to do in a practical way. Like, I'm going to go wash my hands before I say hi to Mom.
Okay.
See, that kind of thing. Or let me just check on her, see if she's still breathing. See, so, or just ask her how she's doing. Just check in. See.
Well, she's going golfing tomorrow, so
yeah, she's pretty good shape.
Yeah.
See, so you're making a lot of this stuff up.
I know. I'm good at that.
Yeah. So then you say, well, it's got nothing to do with my mom. It's got something to do with my debate about my own validity with spirit.
Yes.
So it's really about, is my soul valid?
Okay. Okay, well, I'd like to declare at this moment that my soul is valid and to drop the...
See, you still got this niggling thing. Like maybe in my case, God did make junk.
I do think that, like, maybe I missed something.
Yeah, yeah. But that just means you're missing something, not that you missed out.
Okay.
So you got to scrape some of the extra stuff off of the disturbing vibration.
Okay.
So you can get the pure disturbing vibration. Oh, I missed something. What am I missing? Oh, my lover, my soul. See the change inside when you went along with thinking about that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you took the vibration of that and just settled you right down inside, didn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And part of your character is you just need a little drama. And so you give yourself the positive drama.
Okay.
So the resonance has power.
Thank you.
Yeah. What else we got going here? Yeah, Barbara.
So, all right. Shortly before, within the half an hour before we started our group, I had said to some friends of mine on the phone, I go, maybe we should look at the virus as something good. I don't know if that's love, but this is. And now that you said the nemesis, about and looking at the consequence of arrogance, I go, how we look at our country to now, from President Trump and all the administration and all the way down to Americans, are we arrogant? And is this for us to learn a lesson about arrogance and our own egos as Americans? So I was like, so then when you said that, I go, gosh, we've been very arrogant. That's why we have this. And, and I think we've begun to change how we're looking at it and doing things different. And the stories that you hear about Americans, following the instructions and not being angry and doing it in a loving way, I'm going, oh, so this is good. This is good. We are changing our perception and changing our own arrogance.
Yeah,
so,
it can also bring in a focus where you look at somebody like Trump and the compassion can come forward because despite what he's gotten away with, despite what he gets away with, it comes due. And you start realizing the impact on his person, and so then you can have compassion. So on a deeper level, you have the love and compassion, even though in the practical side, you go vote him out of office.
Right. Yes, of course, everyone's working on that, but it's like,
and we don't have to hate him to do that.
Yeah.
We can love him so much that we know he needs that.
Yeah.
See, I want to be part of the remedy he needs, which is voting him out of office. So I want to be part of his cure, not get even with him. Nemesis will take care of that. That's her job.
So, and I didn't feel like that as part of the country until we were doing this, and then I go, oh my God, I think it includes me in arrogance and ego, and I certainly don't want to be there. So.
Well, keep your engaging personality, because that's not about arrogance. That's about you telling truth to power.
Okay.
So keep that.
So this is, well, I spent a lot of time in silence this year, but silence and the isolation. does feel different to me.
Yeah, good.
You know, oh, I have to stay here, but oh, now I'm isolated. But I want to I want to sit in the same place and be silent.
Well, we'll keep letting it work us. Did you have your hand up, John? We're going to move into meditation here pretty soon.
Oh,
yeah, I did. I was thinking about what you said about humility, and it really struck me. It's one of those traits I'm really trying to work on. And as you talked about how with Carver, it let him meet everybody wherever they were. It took away having the hierarchies, it took away the judgments, that quality of humility. And I just got this very clear insight about how that stepping back and having humility allows me to see others as equals.
Yes, it also gave him unlimited access to his own genius.
No more.
Well, part of your compensation is like in what you know, or having the knowledge, having the insight. So that's the compensation. So this is a trait. Well, so what that also says is there's a spiritual appreciation of intelligence. So in his humility, that gave him access to his genius. So you actually move. So what you're seeking, see if there's lack there, you seek it in a distorted way. If there's no lack there, you get the fullness of it. In other words, you've been taking up space and with your own ego, so your genius can't get to you. So your arrogance has been in the way. It's been a temporary protection that became ingrained. So this is a time in your life when and you can have a good laugh at yourself and make room for the rest of your genius. Because it's not about hierarchy. It's about your intimacy with life.
Mm-hmm.
With intimacy with science.
Yeah, I try that on. It makes me realize, thinking of people I interact with, that it's so much easier to see that whatever stuff they have is theirs, and my stuff is just as messed up as theirs, but it's mine, but so what?
Yeah, and then so in that kind of conversation, you start giving each other answers. And they're bringing the best out of each other. And the stuff falls off. Okay. Well, I'm going to move into a meditation here, okay? So let's just shift gears here. Invite you into that silent place. So when we invite we'll call it the angel of humility. When we invite the angel of humility, it's not putting us down or up, but it's inviting us into that place of silence in which, in that still place, we can begin to hear the winds of spirit, the circulation of the light and the sound as it moves through creation, as the tides of loving wash across the universe, wash across our sensations, wash through the hearts of humanity. And we begin to become attuned to the thoughts and feelings of everyone. But in our stillness, it's not noisy to listen to everybody. We hear their heartbeat, their thoughts, their worries, their successes, their triumphs, their fears. We can hear and sense all that. But it's not overwhelming, because in our silence, we're in the intimacy of love, and in on the coordination. We become part of the synchronous coordination. We become a place of peace, so that the movement of the whole can begin to resolve and bring what is needed to the place that is needed. When we get out of our own way, we add to that vibration of bringing forward what is needed in a timely way. One of my favorite quotes is, to transform yourself into loving, use everything to transform yourself into loving, so the transformation of the planet into loving can take place. So this is such an opportunity. So as you sit in the silence, you start to become aware of how life is assisting you to transform everything in you to loving, which is your true state. And that unleashes that movement of loving through the wholeness, through the unconscious, through the collective. So right now the planet is in a great vulnerability because of the nemesis of the virus, and much more susceptible to the tsunami of love that you are perpetrating through your own silence. You can get to them, you can move in there with them, with the loving, because of the vulnerability. So let's just all come into a trust that in our place and what we're holding, we are standing in for everybody that needs loving now, as a resonance to the truth. And the healing and the reconciliation that these circumstances, that this benevolent nemesis is making us all aware of. So as we shift our focus here, just before we do that, just make a place for this to continue inside of you. You may go out into other activities, but if you pause for a moment, check inside, you'll still feel the movement of this energy. It's a continual process, continual service. Shows you live and breathe and do the various activities of your day. There's a movement through you of this consciousness of love into the world that connects in the intimacy of everyone's heart to reinforce that awakening, that reconciliation within them.